we'll go ahead and start. My name is Ariel Hitron. I'm co-founder and CEO of Second Nature, and today I have the pleasure of to be joined by my co-founder and partner, Alon Shalita, who would talk more about what we do here today. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send you the link to the video and to the slides in the next couple of days, so we can skip that question. And as I said before, now that we have more people joining, please feel free to use the Q&A box for any questions, any comment, any thought on what we're discussing. And we will have a separate kind of Q&A session at the end, or not separate, but we will have a time for Q&A at the end. And we'll review all the questions that were written. Okay, now let's get started. So what we're going to talk today about is, I think that generative AI requires no introductions, but we will speak a little bit about generative AI and how quickly it's been evolving. We've been in this business and writing AI applications and infrastructure and software for over 4 years now with the company, and it's a tremendous thing to see how much the industry has evolved overall. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about traditional AI versus generative AI and what is a big innovation in the underlying technology. And then we'll dive deeper into transforming learning and training specifically. And we'll talk about a little bit about how we are at Second Nature using it, AI in action, and some putting it in context for how customers have been using that. And obviously, we'll have time for Q&A. Just a quick background about Second Nature. So we helping companies with large teams that are customer facing to be best in having the best conversations. And we're doing that through role plays with a lifelike AI persona. And that helps them achieve readiness, whether it's sales readiness, service readiness, or managers to be ready to have those conversations and help them drive success. And with that, I will hand it over to Alon, who will share his screens and slides and talk more about generative AI.
Thank you, Ariel. Hi, everyone. My name is Alon Shalita. I'm co-founder and co-founder and CTO at Second Nature. We'll dive a bit about what is generative AI and how it's being used or how it's been produced in large production systems. Maybe we should start a bit by talking about what is AI and machine learning in general. So AI or machine learning is a known set of techniques and protocols that use learned patterns and structures from existing data to predict, rank, or identify elements in new problems. A few examples could be a process that will look at past sales performance of an organization, certain products and lines, and we'll try to predict will sales figures grow or shrink in the next quarter. Another idea could be a product or a system that will look at past experience with a search engine, how users interacted with a search engine, and we'll try to predict, given a new search query, what are the best search results to be shown to a new user that is querying the search engine. So these techniques are being around for quite a while, been optimized and well used in the past 20, 25 years, mostly around the web. And generative AI is a fairly new set of techniques. I would say that it's been around for the past 4 or 5 years, but it's tried to do something slightly different. These techniques also learn patterns and structures from existing data, but they use them for generation of new content, usually when given some prompt. So there are a few examples of these techniques or these systems. The most widely used one, something that you guys probably all used, is ChatGPT. It's used to generate new segments of text given some prompt. Other examples are DALL-E, which is another system produced by the same company, OpenAI, that is used for image generation. You can give it a snippet of text and it will generate a new image that corresponds to that snippet of text. And 11 Labs is another well-known actor in this space that can produce a human-like audio segment given some textual prompt. So this is generally what is generative AI. A little bit about how it works and how does it work. So first, like any other machine learning or AI process, the first step of building a generative AI system is to start with a data set. Let's say that we're talking about a system that takes a snippet of text that generates a corresponding image. So you can see on the left-hand side, we start with a set of text segments, a dog in a green field, and a corresponding image, a tropical beach, a red ball, and so on and so forth. And now these training corpus or training set is usually counted in the millions. So you need a lot of these examples to start training your model. And sometimes this alone is a very hard task to begin with, just making sure that you have the right data set to train your system. The second step is indeed training the system. You take those pairs of text and images, and you train what we call a model, a machine learning or an AI model that learns the patterns and their relation to the textual description of theirs in a way that can later be retrieved. Here we learn something we called a neural network. It could be different models as well, but here we actually learned a neural network that encodes how image look like and what is the correspondence between that image and its textual description. Now, again, this part of training the model could be extremely expensive. Companies can spend millions and tens of millions of dollars on just this process that can also last for a long time. It can take weeks or maybe even months to generate that neural network that encodes these relationships. Now, once you have that neural network, you can actually use it to generate new things that were not part of the training set. For example, I can assign the network the task of producing an image corresponding to the sentence, a dog holding a red ball. The network will take that sentence, and given what it learned during the learning process, it will produce a new image. You can see that it learned somehow how a dog looks like, it learned somehow how a red ball looks like. It may synthesize these concepts into a single image that correspond to what I asked for. It may even bring in something else that wasn't in the prompt. For example, the fact that there's a concept called green field, and it will assign the dog into that green field. So this is an example on how generative AI process may work. Now, generative AI, even given the fact that it's fairly new concept or only exists for several years, it's already widely used in several production systems. I'll go over a few of these. The first one is Jasper, which is a known system for producing marketing material. You can use it to produce blog posts or social media snippets and stuff like that. And you can see on the left-hand side, you give that system a very short prompt, maybe a sentence like write an article about the benefits of generative AI, a few elements like the tone of voice, informative and friendly, and some keywords, and the system will automatically generate the relevant text for you. So this is an example of,
let's say you make.
So you can use that system to generate these kind of snippets. Another example might be a new system by Adobe. It's called Adobe Firefly that can be used to produce artwork and designs. Let's see an example. So I can take an existing image and actually change the way it looks, or maybe even add some effects like snow. So again, the Adobe Firefly can both generate those images, but also later on modify them to fit your intended design. Another example is something you are all probably using for quite a while. It's for email composition. Gmail called it the Smart Compose feature. Outlook called it the Suggest Reply feature, that given some element of your email or your message can guess or help you to produce the rest of that email message in a way that saves you from typing the whole message, or maybe even add a more sophisticated style to the message itself. And last, something that we here at Second Nature use quite a lot, code completion. A product called GitHub Copilot, which is actually based on a technology by OpenAI, allows software engineers, assists software engineers in writing software and code. Here, for example, by only typing the name of the function me as a software engineer is looking to write, the system already understands what is my intention, what is my intent, and produces a piece of code that fits what I had in mind. So these are examples of, all four of these are actually examples of real products that are actually used by millions and tens of millions of people that already use generative AI to help their daily tasks. Now, like many other technologies, like machine learning, by the way, itself, we have an existing set of challenges that we need to take into account when building and using generative AI system. The first is the ethical considerations, the fact that if the data set that you use to build your system has some biases, so will be the generative AI model that you'll end up using. So you need to make sure that the model that you end up using is not having any biases that will be problematic in your use case. The second question is the question of intellectual property. If your model is actually generating some remix of many different products of many different people, who owns the IP of the generated content? Who's the owner? Is it the people who actually took the original images or wrote the original pieces of text, or is it the person who generated the outcome of generative model? And people need to take that into consideration when they are using the data to produce new items. And last but not least, quality control. Like any other model, not all outcomes of the models will be of high quality, and people should be in the loop, making sure they're constantly making sure that the model is actually producing the right type of results. That's it for me. Thank you. Now for you, Ariel.
Awesome. And I think that we're seeing some questions come in on the Q&A, so we do encourage you to ask questions in the Q&A, and we'll try to address those towards the end, including does AI really generate new content, or is it simply recombining existing one, right? How do you know what's right and what's wrong, and does it always defer to like the lowest common denominator, etc., as well as our own thoughts about products from Google and Bard and others with biases, etc. So we'll address those with some taste of some of the questions that are coming in. So please do add more questions and share your thoughts there. I'll go back to presentation mode. Okay, and share my screen. 1 second. Good. Get to that in a bit. But right now, we're talking about how AI is being used in learning and development. So Alon spoke about different types of uses for AI, both the infrastructure of how it's being built and then different uses, etc. And I think that in this context, we're thinking about learning and development, we're thinking about sales enablement. It's great that there's all of these platforms and ChatGPT and Bard and others, but how can we as learners, as L&D people, as sales enablement folks can actually use that? And there's a few ways that we've seen people, both vendors that develop software as well as learning and development experts, use these new technologies, these new models and infrastructure. One of them is to personalize the learning. So the ability to take a big chunk of data and personalize then the learning experience for each and every user. And that can be done by analyzing the responses of the user and then creating a personalized experience for each user. It also can leverage the generative aspect of the underlying models to actually generate different things for each and every user. So it can be both on the learning path level as well as the experience itself. Speaking of experiences, I think that the learning experience as a whole is going through a big shift. And when we started out, we had like essentially an AI avatar or counterpart or persona that can speak to you. And we had a lot of question marks from the market. Like, is this chatbot thing going to work? Even though we're not doing a chatbot, but a voice conversation, but like people had a lot of hesitation about that. How can people use that in order to learn and to get better in their sales, in their service, in their management capacity, and so on? I think that with ChatGPT being so prominent, this question becomes less of an issue, and people really think about how can we create a new experience. And this AI helper, AI assistant, AI co-pilot, right, that helps you do your daily tasks become more and more standardized, more and more what people expect. And they expect the same in learning, the same way that when YouTube came out, people were expecting to learn with watching videos. Now they expect a different type of experience. Will it go the full kind of VR, AR direction? Maybe eventually. I think that right now it's still very hard to generate those experiences and personalize them on the fly. So we've seen a lot of experiences outside of AR, VR, just with personalized conversations, chat experiences, etc. So I think that's a big thing. I think another one is the real-time feedback aspect of it. When you're in a chat, when you're in a conversation, you're getting real-time feedback all the time. And that's a very different experience than watch a video, read a document, answer a quiz, you get it right, which is a lot of the learning how it used to be versus, write a document or write an article or write an answer, submit it, and wait for a human to review it and give you feedback later on. So everything is getting accelerated with this, and people expect instantaneous learning, instantaneous response, much more experiential than it was before. I think that another thing that's very obvious that people are using generative AI for is the content creation, content authoring. A big part of what we do in learning and development is author and create new content. And I've seen two things that are crucial in that form. One is just the creation of content. So many platforms have implemented generative capabilities in there to really streamline the content creation, whether it's writing an email or writing a full learning module or writing a quiz or creating a mock conversation. Content authoring powered by AI is definitely a trend that we're seeing. And I think that the other thing that people is less talked about, but I think it's a very smart way of using GenAI, is not to generate something from nothing, but to transform an existing content, summarize it, condense it, turn it into a learning object. So think about the difference between a deck that's coming from marketing to a conversation that sales is doing in the field. Those are two very different things. But you can create today a learning experience, a mock simulation, a role play, automatically based on the deck that marketing created, or a website, or a recorded call. We'll talk about that in a minute. So both the generation, help me write this email, and transformation, take an existing library of content and transform it into a learning module. I think other aspects of this is it has to be seamlessly integrated into the flow of work. So if you have your flow of work, your day-to-day, and you work in certain software, you work in certain areas, and all of a sudden you have to get out of your work to go to a different app to start migrating your discussions and your content there, it's much more tedious, and it's great for early adopters, but the early majority and the lagging majority would expect it to be integrated into your day-to-day. So think about Copilot from Microsoft in that sense. It's taking ChatGPT, but putting it inside your Word, inside your PowerPoint, inside your Excel, where you actually work if you're working in the Office suite, right? And same works for Google Documents, etc. I think that, and on the learning capacity, it's how do you seamlessly integrate the learning into the flow of the day-to-day actions of the sales team or the service team or any team that is learning, and then making it micro, right? Attention span is much, much lower. People expect immediate response, and that's kind of preceding generative AI, but I think that it's just easier now to repurpose content items and breaking them down into smaller sections and make it work in that context. So these are some of the things or some of the trends and that we're seeing with different both vendors as well as organizations that implement generative AI as part of their learning and development. We want to share a little bit of like details of how it works for us, for Second Nature. And as I said, we started off, it was before all of the generative AI hype, and we built a lot of the models on our own. And then we incorporated and infused a lot of our work with generative AI and the public models that are out there. And that really allows you to do a lot of things. So what I'm going to show you here is what a two-way conversation with an avatar looks like. And it has generative AI in 3 different aspects to it. The first one is the creation flow. If we'll have time, we'll go to in a bit. And this is how do you take an existing website or existing collateral or existing call and repurpose it into a learning module, into a role play conversation that is intended to help sellers practice. That's number one. Number 2 is how do you deliver an interactive experience that is personalized in a sense that it responds to whatever I'm saying and give me personalized feedback and tips for improvement for myself. And the third is how do you analyze a conversation, whether it's with an AI or with another person, and see how well this conversation maps to the gold standard. So 3 different use cases for usage of generative AI, from content authoring to experience to data analysis. And for this, I'm going to show a quick video.
Hi there. I'm Miriam, the Director of Sales Training at Tech Solutions, Inc. I came across Second Nature's sales training software, and I'm intrigued by the AI-powered role plays. However, I have a few questions and concerns that I'd like to discuss before we consider implementing this solution.
Absolutely, Miriam. We'd love to discuss it with you. Before we start, I do have a few questions for you. Would it be okay if we start with a quick background about Tech Solutions Inc., about your company, your needs, etc.?
Sure. Tech Solutions, Inc. is a mid-sized tech company that provides innovative software solutions to businesses. We have a diverse sales team that caters to different industries and markets.
Got you. Understood. And what is the size of the sales team right now?
We have around 50 sales reps currently.
Got you.
I have a few questions and concerns about Second Nature's sales training software. Firstly, I'm curious about the AI's ability to adapt to different sales scenarios. We have a diverse product range, and our sales conversations can vary greatly. How flexible is the AI in handling different sales scenarios?
So just to narrate the experience a little bit, this is a conversation between this sales guy and the AI, and you can see that the person can ask the AI questions, and it would respond in context, and then the AI can continue the conversation and ask questions back and expect an answer, and she can be mean and she can be tough and she can ask follow-up questions until she gets the information that she wants. So there's a very interactive role play experience in here, and then later on there's also a feedback experience I want to jump into. Absolutely, the AI is extremely flexible, automatically suggests concerns. So as you can see, I'm getting a score. both on my knowledge and my style. I'm getting some feedback, and I'm getting very specific feedback on opening, pain diagnostics, impact discussion, addressing the concerns, summary, and so on and so forth. So everything you need to happen in discovery call is here alongside with more soft skills.
Hi there.
So again, this is an example of how this process works. It shows both the interactive conversation as well as the analysis. Both of them are using generative AI capabilities. So I think this is one aspect of it. If you think about taking this one step further, is you can take the same approach and analyze live calls. So you can take a live call that happened in the field and say, okay, now I don't want to do the role play. I just want to do the analysis using AI and see how well did the person delivering the call did meet the guidelines. And those guidelines can be customer specific or company specific. They are defined and edited by the companies themselves, which is the creation part, right? So you have the creation part, the authoring, the experience, as well as the analysis. And then those can be mixed and matched together. So think about the learning journey of a person. Every call they do, say it's a discovery call or a negotiation or closing or customer service or employee evaluation, can be recorded and analyzed and give them feedback on what they should do better. And then not only that, they can, with one click, try a role play that helps them retry the same code. So I understand where I was coming short with, say, discussing the impact of my solution or tool, etc. I can go in and the system would generate a new call based on the live conversation, the actual conversation, for me to practice it. And then I can see how I'm grading in the live call versus the recorded call, meaning in the conversation with real prospect versus the AI. And I can practice multiple times until I get the skills that I'm missing. So hopefully this gives a sense of how this can be implemented in practice. In terms of what's the impact of that, and when is this helpful at all? So here's a few examples of this. I'll run through them fairly quickly, and then we'll go into the Q&A and answering any questions. One example here is a customer of ours called Zoom, and the main effort that there was in terms of educating a large sales team is in rolling out a new product. How can you move from this interface that we're using right now and we used to do every day, selling that, to selling a phone that may have a physical phone or a virtual phone, and it's a completely different buyer, a completely different story, completely different value proposition. How do you get people very confident in delivering that? And Zoom used a technology of second nature in order to help their entire sales team get very comfortable with that and deliver that at scale. So that would be one example of how this theory becomes very, very practical. You can take a methodology like SPIN or MEDPIC or any other best practice, and then inject into it the product data and get a simulation that is tailored to that specific use case that allows people to be very comfortable discussing it. Another example is a company that uses called GoHealth. They use a very scripted or semi-scripted conversations and have seen a tremendous increase in sales as well as a cut down in onboarding time because of the use of practice with the system. So again, practice makes perfect. Everybody knows that, but now we have some evidence and results to speak to that. And the way that this comes together, and I think this may be interesting for the folks that say, okay, so this is one experience out of a big learning curriculum. How does those things fit together? So a typical AI program, it's a program, can include multiple bite-sized simulations. So you can take your conversation, break it down to its elements, and practice each part separately, and then integrate the entire thing to a final call. Now, goes for very transactional sales model. It can also apply for a more enterprise sales model. It can also apply for a service conversations. It can also apply for managers who need to be trained on how to have hard conversations with their employees. So there's a variety of use cases that we've seen people use this type of AI in order to gain confidence and competent in delivering those conversations. I want to leave time for questions and answers. I've seen that some of you have added questions in the Q&A button, in the Q&A module. So please go ahead and add more questions in your Q&A, and we'll try and address those as we go. To start with, I'll start with some of the questions that were already entered. And this one would go maybe to Alon to start with. The question here is, with generative AI, is it really new content, or it's simply recombination or reconfiguration of existing content?
That's an interesting question, and I think surprisingly the answer is yes, but in a much more lower level than you'd guess, right? It's not like the model is tasked with finding 3-4 images or snippets of text and recombining them into a new image. But on the other hand, the model is generating something new, but everything it got is simply a lot of other examples. So it must use those examples, some recombination of low-level information stored in this example to generate the new instance. So most likely the answer is yes, the new content is just a recombination of the existing content, but in a very low-level manner. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think that it's almost like a philosophical question, right? Does any of us generate anything new, or do we just repurpose and reorganize existing content, right? So sometimes it feels like it's a combination of the two that we're seeing. I think that another question on that line of questioning is, since AI is a different engine, does it always default to the answer that has the highest probability of being correct? And does it squash creativity in this case? Or is there a way to tune a module in terms of how creative it can be in making up things, hallucinations, and or creativity, or being more strict with the answers?
That's a good question as well. So computers are basically deterministic machines, right? They don't have any way to, by default, they won't pick different paths. If you instruct them to pick the best path or the most correct answer for a certain task, they will pick that correct answer. But the producers of generative AI models understand that you need to add some sense of variety or creativity to all of the production of such models. And what they usually allow you to do is both to introduce some randomness to the decisions, and even control it through a method that technically are called the temperature of the instance. So you can say, look, I want the best answer you can provide me, but add some randomness through the temperature parameter. It could be low, so it will be most likely the correct answer, but with slight deviations. It could be high, and then you can go wild and pick very different directions. And this is how users of these models can actually overcome this problem of things are too predictable and not innovative.
Absolutely. I think that another question that I've seen here is how easy it is to implement an AI solution. And that's a tricky question, right? Because it depends on what the solution is and how well it is baked. I think that it's changing super fast right now, this landscape. So if 2 years ago it was like a bare API that it was hard to fathom how exactly it would work in terms of applications. Now we're seeing a lot more vendors implement AI capabilities in their stack. So I think that once there's a software vendor that implements it, it becomes much easier, because then it's part of a workflow. It's part of a business problem that you're trying to solve. If there is no vendor that implemented it, then it's much harder. For what we're seeing from our direct customers, it becomes much easier, because there's always a gap between the way that things used to work, the content that I have, the processes that I had, etc., and this new thing and what it could do. So I think that building the workflows really kind of bridges that gap. So I'd say this is it. And then you get to a point where you can implement a solution like that within hours, instead of waiting weeks or months of planning and training and fine-tuning the models, etc. You say, here's my content, build me like role plays based on this content and spin methodology, metric methodology, corporate visions, winning by design, what have you. So I think that's a great way of looking at that. I think that there's a question about some people still not comfortable with AI in general, and I think that also our sellers adopting this, or they have to be forced to do that, etc. I think that it's changing very rapidly. It's changing very rapidly in a surprising way. What I thought initially is that this AI messaging would be more akin to younger audience and tech companies, and that's that. I think that right now what we're seeing is that everybody wants to take part in this, because it significantly shifts what people can do in their jobs. And it's like a superpower. And nobody wants to be left behind without a superpower, right? If you're an L&D and you're creating content and you're still writing things manually instead of using ChatGPT or any implication or application of generative AI within the tools that you're working with, then you're moving slower than the innovators and the early majority, maybe even right now. So everybody wants a part of it. And we've seen adoption from very traditional companies with all sorts of audiences in trying to educate themselves and improve themselves with that. I think another question, and do send questions at the chat, and if not, then we'll end with that. There's a question about if more content is actually more effective. And I think that also depends on how well you design your AI workflows. Because if you build it on a solid infrastructure of knowledge and a solid workflows, then the content generated is extremely effective. We see that in the feedback that we're getting from the actual sellers. We see that in the scores and how they go up, and in the business outcomes. So it's definitely becoming effective. It looks like we're 40 minutes in, and if there are no other questions in the next minute or so, then we will call it a day for now. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and there will be a recording sent. If you have any other questions that you want to share with us, we'd be thrilled to communicate and to interact with you all, and we'll send a follow-up email for that. Thank you so much.